Hi, this is Cezanne, self-taught visual and spoken word artist and author of the Black Love novel, Journey of a Sister, which features my artwork and poetry. Born in the UK of Jamaican parentage, I was raised in the Christian faith. By my mid-30s, I developed a close relationship with my creator to the point where I was inspired to write loving messages from the poet in the sky. One of them, Look to Me, features in year 1 of this story. However, I began to question what I'd been taught to believe. In 2001, I was inspired to write a fearless letter to God, which also features in year 1 of this story. I ended the letter by asking for the truth. Your quest for the truth begins when you ask the right questions. This marked a turning point in my life. My poetry and art became creative expressions of everything I was discovering along the way. While this book is loosely based on my own her story, it's not my autobiography. 46,000 words were channeled, meaning they came through me rather than from me, and it's packed with ancestral wisdom. Between 2007 and 2010, I learned how to meditate intensively. During the process, I unblocked as an artist and painted my first collection, Nature's Art. I was inspired to use my artwork and poetry to illustrate this story. Links are at the back of the ebook to listen to my poetry and to download my artwork, which incorporates colour therapy. I used my painting Black Butterfly to illustrate the front cover because it's symbolic of transformation. The Adinkra symbol I've used at the end of each chapter is to remind you to look out for transformation in the following areas: her mind, self-identity, her hair journey, religion to spirituality, lustful sex to sacred sex, their individual personal development, and the transformation of their relationship. This book is intended to take you on your own transformational journey of self-discovery. You may notice that sometimes I capitalize the word self. This is when I'm referring to our higher self. If you're a believer, you may call it the Holy Spirit. If you're non-religious, you may refer to it as your intuition. Journey of a Sister is available in ebook and audiobook formats. You may find it beneficial to listen and read at the same time. At the back of the ebook is a £5 discount voucher towards your personally signed hard copy. So without further ado, start your journey of self-discovery. Journey of a Sister, Year 1. The Truth. Part 1. Self-reflection. It's a warm spring evening in 2007. After tucking her boys in for the night, Cezanne climbs into her own bed and settles down to write in her journal. It's been 3 years since I broke up with Mark. Being on my own has given me plenty of time to think about what went wrong. Now I can see that I had low self-esteem and he was only reflecting back to me my own lack of self-worth and insecurities. Not to mention projecting his own. Now he's left me to raise our sons alone. How did I end up like this? I should have married Robbie when he proposed. He was the best thing that ever happened to me. But back then, I couldn't accept his love for me because I didn't love myself. I didn't feel good enough for him. So instead, I allowed Mark to treat me the way I subconsciously believed I deserved to be treated. How would my life have been different with a handful of different choices? From now on, before I make any life-changing decisions, I'm going to seek counsel from someone who's had more experience in life than I have. I wish I could have relied on Mum for that, but she's never offered any kind of advice other than Bible scriptures, and that's not always practical when emotions and hormones are involved. She pauses to smile wryly. As she thinks about where she is in life right now, Cezanne writes, I feel like a caterpillar crawling through life. But even a caterpillar still has the heart of a butterfly and still aspires to fly. As she writes freehand, a beautiful poem emerges about the process of metamorphosis. She likens the stages a caterpillar goes through to transform into a butterfly with the process she must go through to transform her life. She titles her poem, The Black Butterfly Effect. Writing poetry is Cezanne's way of expressing her deepest emotions. Occasionally, she's inspired to write a poem which comes as a download, where she doesn't have to think about what she's writing. It comes through her rather than from her. Over the past few years, Cezanne has done the inner work to uncover the root cause of her issues and has put herself through a series of self-development programs to raise her self-esteem and build self-confidence. She now carries herself better, has a more positive self-image, and loves and accepts herself unconditionally. But her religious programming isn't about to be erased so easily. Raised in the faith, she still believes her sexual thoughts and feelings are sinful, which keeps her in a perpetual state of unworthiness every time she thinks or acts out of her natural desires. Being a young Scorpio woman, sexual sin is her weakness. Her spirit is willing, but her flesh is weak. She's been celibate since her breakup, but now the thought of having a man around again is tempting. Wanting to set a better example for her sons, Cezanne feels confident that she can now attract a man who will reflect her own raised self-esteem. I'm in a much better place now, and I feel ready to try love again. What type of man would suit me best? While India Ari's Ready for Love plays softly in the background, she writes a list of all the qualities she desires her dream man to have, before closing her journal and falling into a deep, peaceful sleep, smiling to herself. Self-love. The boys are at their dad's for the weekend. Cezanne is feeling more sensual than usual. Lying on the sofa with her eyes closed, she slides her hand up her skirt, down into her panties, and begins pleasuring herself. She wonders why God created the clitoris. Is it there for me to please myself, or for my husband to satisfy me? According to Cezanne's church, it's even a sin to masturbate, since the mind is likely to start conjuring up images of a sexual nature. If you so much as think about having sex, it's just as bad as doing the act. With all these thoughts running through her mind, she can't help recreating her imaginary lover, who visits whenever she needs a release. As she imagines him riding her silently back and forth, she increases the pressure and speed of her finger while simulating sex on the sofa. With every withdrawal, she lets out a sigh, and with each penetration, a deep moan. Before long, she comes to climax, and he slips away before she even opens her eyes. Cezanne feels like she's always sinning. She just can't seem to stay on the straight and narrow path. She doesn't understand why God would give her sexual desires, then tell her to ignore them until she's married. What if she ends up being one of the women in the church who remains single, since there aren't enough men to go around? The thought of never having sex again doesn't appeal to Cezanne. Why make her body desire sex if she's not allowed to have it until after marriage? No one in church has been able to answer this satisfactorily, and whenever she asks her Heavenly Father directly, he always remains silent. So despite her weakness, Cezanne continues going to church, paying her tithes, studying her Bible, and getting to know God personally, so she can discover the reason he created her, her destiny. It was only after having children of her own that Cezanne began to understand God's unconditional love for her. She could do nothing wrong to make him stop loving her. As her spiritual father, he would advise her on how to live her life, but if she chose to do her own thing and fell, he would simply pick her up, dust her off, and stand her back on her feet again. And that's how they developed their relationship. His strength really was made perfect through her weakness. The rebellion. After a stressful day at work, collecting the boys from after-school club, cooking dinner and spending quality time with them before bed, Cezanne is finally able to sit down and relax. She switches on the TV to images of starving children in Africa, the latest report of another black-on-black murder, and the state of the country's economy. Fear and anxiety begin to creep in. Cezanne wonders what's her reason for living. Is it to live a meaningless existence, get saved, then spend the rest of her life looking forward to going to heaven? There's got to be more to life than this, she thinks. As a child of the king, Cezanne believes she's entitled to the best of everything, but instead, she's struggling to make ends meet. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So what's stopping her from claiming her piece of the pie? The devil. That's what the Bible says. The devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy anything good that's due to her. The only way to stop him from stealing her good is to fight him every day. Put on the whole armour of God so that you can withstand the fiery darts of the devil. That's what she'd been taught. But Cezanne is tired of fighting. All I want is to get my life to work. What's the point of being a Christian if my life here on earth isn't better than a non-Christian? Why do I have to wait until I die and go to heaven? That evening, feeling brave, Cezanne decides to write God a fearless letter asking all the questions her church couldn't answer. As his child, she should be able to approach him openly, since he could see what's in her heart and thoughts anyway. She's going to tell it as it is, and assuming there are others who would love to ask these same questions, but are too scared for fear of his wrath, she stands in proxy for them. She begins with the fall of Lucifer story, as this seems to be the root cause of all the world's problems. She retells it as she understands it, that Lucifer, God's lead worshipper, the most beautiful angel of them all, got a bit egotistical and decided that he was worthy of some of this praise too. He obviously didn't understand why you alone should be worshipped and why everyone else has to bow to you. This is where all the trouble started. She explains how Lucifer managed to get a third of the angels to join him in rebelling against God, which resulted in him kicking them out of heaven. She asks why God hadn't banished them to one of the far distant planets in the galaxy and put some kind of force field around it so they couldn't reach his new creation on Earth. Instead, they had come and corrupted his creation as if he had no control over what Lucifer and his posse did. She questions whether God really can kill Satan because if he could, surely he would have done it by now. After all, you were quick to punish man when we rebelled. She even accuses God of showing favouritism. She proceeds to analyse the fall of Adam and Eve story, again trying to get to the root cause of all the world's and her problems. After all, if it wasn't for Adam and Eve being tempted by the devil, we would all still be living in heaven on earth, as was originally intended. She reminds God that he made them in his very own image and created a beautiful garden for them to inhabit. He gave them free access to all the fruit of the garden, except from the tree right in the middle of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She points out that Lucifer also had free access to the Garden of Eden, and transforming into a serpent, successfully tempted Eve into eating of the forbidden fruit, and she in turn tempted Adam. Instead of God taking responsibility for leaving them unprotected, he cursed Adam and Eve, evicted them from their home, then sent them out into the big wide world only to be tempted and corrupted by the devil even more. It was only after banishing them that God placed an angel at the entrance of the garden to guard the tree of life, which was situated right beside the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Without access to the tree of life, Adam and Eve were doomed to death. None of this makes any sense to Cezanne. She asks if the tree of life was more important to God than the human race. She then questions why God had placed the tree of knowledge of good and evil right in the centre of the garden if they weren't supposed to eat of it. Had he deliberately set them up to fail? Cezanne suggests that even if the serpent hadn't come along, curiosity would have got the better of them sooner or later anyway. She writes, "As a mother, I know that if I place a handful of sweets in the middle of the table, in the middle of the sitting room, and then told my children, don't eat those sweets, and just left them there for weeks and weeks, I guarantee you that it would only be a matter of time before those sweets started disappearing down their throats. She argues that her children would eventually take the risk of whatever punishment they would have to suffer later, just for that moment of pleasure. She continues, now, what if I then said to my children, right, because you ate those sweets, I'm not going to give you any dinner for a week. Wouldn't you think I was being a bit harsh? Standing in Adam and Eve's defence, Cezanne claims they were naive, inexperienced and gullible. They didn't stand a chance against the guile of his enemy, and the punishment served on them far outweighed their actions. Instead of making them feel as if it was their fault Satan came to tempt them, she thinks God should have apologised to Adam and Eve for putting them in such jeopardy in the first place. Instead, he cursed the whole of the human race, and now generations later, we are still suffering because Adam and Eve ate of the forbidden fruit. But does the punishment really fit the crime? The intensity of her Scorpio energy flows onto the pages as she continues her critical examination of what she had learned from years of studying the Bible. She points out that the world has been in a state of anarchy literally since the beginning of time. The Bible has barely begun when already there's disobedience, damnation, murder, incest, war, famine and woe. But who's really to blame here? Man, the devil, or dare I say it, you? At this point, she cringes as if waiting to be struck by a bolt of lightning. When it doesn't happen, she continues more boldly. Referring to another scripture, she asks why God had instructed her not to react to people who acted wickedly towards her. Instead, she was expected to see past the flesh and deal with it from the spiritual realm, since they are just pawns in the devil's game. She tells God she has a problem with that, since he had consistently throughout the Bible reacted to flesh and blood people, destroying them when he could no longer stand their wicked ways. She reminds him of Sodom and Gomorrah and the flood, two occasions where God in his anger had wiped out whole populations. But you didn't kill Satan, the originator of the corruption. So when the earth became repopulated, the whole cycle just started all over again. Pausing to think about this, she writes, I'm not sure I even believe this story, as I don't think you would be so naive as to believe that by wiping out the whole of humankind without destroying the root cause, you would eradicate the problem. You are far too wise a God to not see that. For a moment, she seems to come back to her senses as she watches the sun set through her window, turning the sky a beautiful, hazy blue-red. But returning to her journal, her questions instantly resurface. After reminding God that the battle is in fact between him and the devil and doesn't really have anything to do with us, his creation, she points out that the war is getting worse and worse. People are being murdered, raped, tortured, beaten. Children are starving, going missing, being abused, corrupted, killed. The earth is dying from pollution. There's famine, earthquakes and polluted water and air everywhere. And there's a big hole in the ozone layer. This isn't the world that you created for me to live in. I was meant to live in peace and harmony, joy and happiness with you and my fellow men. The fact that there's some devil making my life a living hell isn't my fault. I didn't create him, you did. So why don't you take responsibility and protect me when you see him coming for me, like the loving father you're meant to be? Pausing to reflect on what she has just written, Cezanne cringes at the thought of what would happen to her if she allowed her children to be abused by some crazy tyrant. Wouldn't she be held accountable? So why not God, the ultimate heavenly Father? She challenges God to look at his own faults. How many mistakes have you made in your lifetime? I'd say Putting your adversary on the same planet as your new creation has to be the biggest mistake of all time. What did you expect Satan to do? Leave us alone, knowing we were made in the image of the person he hated the most? You? Desperately seeking to know God's thinking behind his decisions, she implores, I know your ways are not my ways, so please help me to understand. Cezanne asks why God wasn't supplying all her needs as promised in his word. We're expected to wait on you, and we have no way of knowing when you're going to come up with the goods. So many times I've waited on you, believing and praying for my miracle. And when it doesn't happen, we're expected to resort to the conclusion that it was just not God's timing. You seem to play with us like we're a chess game, only moving when it suits you. She again implores, I want to know and understand you more. I want to understand your ways. She recalls the times she had walked closely with God, thinking they had been the most beautiful. I mean, there's nothing like waking up in the morning and feeling your presence all around me, or being inspired to write a piece of poetry. But I want more. I want a big house. I want nice clothes. I want to be able to go on holiday yearly with my family, buy myself a decent car, have plastic surgery to correct all those things you got wrong with me. Cezanne acknowledges that it's probably due to her lack of the fear of the Lord why she's not walking in his blessings. Still, she wants to know why she's expected to do God's will without questioning his word. What good is a free will when you demand that I do things your way? What kind of a free will is that, anyway? She demands the answers to her questions through her sheer willpower. In all honesty, Cezanne loves the Lord and desires to serve him in spirit and in truth. But the truth is, she's finding it hard to put her trust in him totally and follow his ways. I know your word. I've read it, spoken it, meditated upon it, memorized it, and I still have so many needs. Is it because I didn't believe enough, or perhaps I didn't pray enough, or maybe I just didn't have enough faith? All I want to do is live the life of my dreams. Is that asking too much? Why can't I just live in heaven on earth? Because she has experienced God as being pure, unconditional love, Cezanne is confident that she can approach him in this way. She had been finding it difficult to match the Jekyll and Hyde character in the Bible with the God she has developed a relationship with, and her letter is a test to see whether he'll now switch on her. She concludes her letter by stating that although Lucifer took 1/3 of the angels with him, there are still 2/3 left in heaven with God. She tells him that she believes he's mightier than the devil, and since he has twice as many angels, where's the battle, really? She writes her last lines. You know, the more I think about all of this, the more I realise these stories just don't sound true, nor do they reflect the character of you. So now what I really want is the truth. Feeling pleased with herself, Cezanne titles her letter The Rebellion. Writing it had felt cathartic. She has put it out there, and now she will wait for his response. God's reply. The following morning, as soon as Cezanne wakes up, she feels inspired to write. Picking up her journal and pen occupying the space of her dream man on the bed, she turns over a fresh page. Think on my love. Think on my goodness. Think on my grace and all the things I've done for you. When you think on these things, your problems will become small. Your mountains will become molehills, and everything you aspire to will become reachable. Don't look at your situation. Look to me. You can do all things through me. I am the way that makes crooked paths straight. I am the key that unlocks the doors. I am the great I am. Do not fear when trials come your way. Do not bend when temptation is at your door. Always remember that in trials there are testimonies, and no testimony without a test. So don't be discouraged. Don't feel downhearted. Be of good cheer, and always remember that in me there is victory. The poet in the sky replies promptly in a language she can relate to. Poetry. As she's writing, she can feel his presence surrounding her, as if comforting her. Tears roll down her cheeks as she writes a letter of apology back for allowing herself to lose focus. Synchronicity. The following week, Cezanne is at a community event test marketing her new inspirational posters. A counsellor from the local Chamber of Commerce visits her table. "Hi, these are nice. Did you design them?" "Yes, I wrote the poetry too. I thought I'd print a few to see how well they'll sell." "Good idea. The International Caribbean Trade Expo would be a great place to do that, but you'll need to print a lot more. It's taking place in the Docklands next weekend. I'll give you a number to call to book a stand if you like." "Yes, please." He writes a number on the back of his business card and hands it to her. "Mention my name. They might give you a discount." "Thank you. I will. Good luck." He smiles, waves, and walks off. Cezanne calls her sister Janice and asks if she wants to go halves on the stand. Janice travels to places like Egypt, West Africa, and the Caribbean to buy things of black interest to sell. The Caribbean Expo. Thousands of people flock to the venue in the Docklands over the 2-day event. There's a buzz of excitement in the auditorium as hundreds of stallholders, including Cezanne, talk excitedly to their prospective buyers. Fashion shows, workshops, hair care demonstrations, performances and inspirational talks take place at designated times, including a keynote speech from the Jamaican High Commissioner. All these divert the crowd's attention from time to time, yet still, Cezanne makes over 3 times as much money as she had invested in her half of the stand and printing her posters. This is a great launch to her business, but that's not the only reason this event will go down in her story. She notices him first from across the room. He seems to stand out in the crowd like a neon light, appearing head and shoulders above everyone else. As he approaches, Cezanne begins to feel all hot and flustered. Butterflies flutter around in her stomach. Her heart starts pounding. Palms are sweating. Does she even know this guy? He's now just a few feet away, close enough for her to see that she doesn't recognise him, and at over 6 feet tall he really is head and shoulders above everyone else. She then realises he's not heading towards her stand, but the 100 Black Men of London opposite. She calls out to him impulsively, "Excuse me!" He turns, sees her waving at him, and begins walking towards her. She suddenly feels nervous. "What am I doing? I'm not in the habit of pursuing men. Plus, I'm meant to be working. As their eyes meet, she flashes him a huge, inviting smile. He accepts her invitation. She thinks he's attractive and he thinks she's attractive too. She flicks her hair. "Hi, I thought you might be interested in my posters," she quips over-enthusiastically. They're nice. Are these your poems?" "Yes." He stands silently reading one. "I can tell, you're deep," he comments when he's finished. Cezanne laughs. "Would you like one?" she asks. "How much are they?" "Well, you can buy one for £4.50, two for £8 or three for £10. He chooses 3 different designs and pays her the £10. "My mum will appreciate these," he says gratefully. "What made you come here today?" She tries to prolong his stay by rolling the posters up slowly before putting an elastic band around them. Neat, heavy eyebrows adorn his sparkling dark brown eyes. He's dressed smart casual in a pair of jeans, shirt and polished shoes. As she hands him the tube, he smiles with full, luscious lips, revealing perfect white teeth against his dark chocolate skin. But it wasn't his looks that had attracted her to him in the first place. In fact, she couldn't quite place her finger on what it was. "My friend invited me." He points to another brother at the 100 Black Men of London stand opposite. "How long have you been doing this?" he asks, indicating towards her poster display with his tube. "I've only just started, actually. You're my..." She clicks her number counter. 28th customer. "Congratulations. What were you doing before this?" "Oh, I used to work in admin, but I recently left my job so I could focus on starting my own business." "Wow, sounds pretty much like me." As he proceeds to tell her his story, Cezanne suddenly notices that the whole room has become silent, as if they're the only 2 people in the room, and she can only hear their conversation. Everything around them has become like a blurred whirlwind, as if they're caught in some kind of time warp. In the few moments that they converse, they share information about themselves as if they'd known each other for ages. "I have to go. Do you have a card?" He bursts the imaginary bubble, and the room returns to normal. Cezanne picks up one of her homemade laminated business cards from the table and hands it to him. He smiles at her slogan, touching the heart through art. "I'll call you," he says with promise in his eyes. "I'll look forward to it," she smiles encouragingly. "My name's Charles, by the way." He extends his hand. They shake hands quite formally, but there's a lingering in the time they should have let go. "I'm Cezanne." As he walks across to meet his friend, Janice asks, "Who was that?" He calls. 2 days later, true to his word, Charles calls. Cezanne is in the living room watching the Oprah Winfrey Show while her boys, Micah and Elijah, play on the floor noisily. And she instinctively knows it's him. The boys hadn't come up in their conversation at the expo. She jumps up to leave the room, calling out to them on the way. "Be quiet!" She puts on her business voice. "Hello, Cezanne speaking." "Hi, Cezanne, it's Charles. Remember we met at the Caribbean Expo?" "Oh, hi, Charles. Of course I remember. How could I forget? Nice to hear from you." He senses the genuine appreciation in her voice and responds to it. "I couldn't wait to call, but I thought I'd give you a couple of days to rest after your busy weekend. How was it?" "Great. I made a huge profit and lots of new contacts too, including you," she answers excitedly. "How many other contacts did you make?" he asks as if defending his territory. Cezanne laughs. "Not like that. I mean business contacts." "Oh, that's all right then. So I don't have any competition." She can see where this is heading. "Could you do me a favour? Can you call back after 8, please? Once the boys are in bed, I'll be able to talk with you properly. Is that okay?" "Oh, I didn't know you had children. How old are they?" he asks in a surprised tone. Judging from her slender figure, he'd figured she was childless. 6 and 8, she answers cautiously. "Oh, okay, I'll call back later then." As Cezanne presses the end call button, she wonders whether he will call back. He obviously hadn't banked on her having children. After dinner, spending quality time with the boys reading, finding out how their day at school was, and praying with them before putting them to bed, Cezanne returns to the living room and sits down to relax. She glances at the clock. It's 8:30 p.m. Just as she's about to think, "I knew he wouldn't call back," her mobile phone starts ringing. It's him. "Hi, Charles. Thanks for calling back, and sorry about earlier." "Nothing to be sorry about. Are you okay to talk now?" "Sure. What would you like to talk about?" "Well, I'm not one to beat around the bush. Are you single?" She can hardly believe he's still interested. "Yes, but I'm not about to jump into a relationship with you, if that's what you're thinking," she says though. Charles isn't deterred. "No, of course not. I'd just like to get to know you better. How do you feel about that?" Cezanne relaxes and smiles. "Yes, I'd like to get to know you better too. So tell me more about yourself. I know you write poetry. You're starting your own business. You have 2 sons and you're a beautiful, smart woman. What else do I need to know about you?" Cezanne laughs nervously. "If you had called me beautiful a couple of years ago, I would have said you were lying." "Why?" "Well, I grew up being called the ugly duckling of the family. I had to do a lot of work with positive affirmations to change my inner programming." "Well, I wasn't lying. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I think you're gorgeous." "Thank you. Well, what about you? Tell me more about yourself. Do you have any children?" "No, not yet." "Okay, so how do you spend your free time?" "Well, I go to the gym most mornings before work. I'm an accountant by day, but I also like to study numbers in my spare time. Numerology, to be exact. Numbers fascinate me." "Ugh, maths was my worst subject at school. What do you find so fascinating about numbers?" "Well, everything in the universe is based on mathematical precision. To understand life, you must understand numbers. For instance, knowing your life path number can help you to discover and fulfill your soul purpose." "What's a life path number?" "It's the most important number relating to your birth." "Oh, why?" "Because it reveals the roadmap to your life. If you follow the path, it can lead you to your destiny." "But is our destiny preordained, or can we create it?" "Good question, Cezanne. I can see I'm going to enjoy our conversations." "You're right. We all have the freedom to live our life as we choose. We can either reach our full potential or make some smaller version of ourselves. But our true purpose is contained within from the moment we are born, just like a seed waiting to grow." How can I find out my life path number?" "I can work it out now if you like. It won't take a minute." "Okay then." "Great. What's your date of birth?" "That's a sneaky way of trying to find out my age. Why don't you just ask?" "Oh, this will tell me much more than your age. You'll be like an open book before me. Do you still want me to continue?" "Only if we do yours as well." "Deal." "Okay, my date of birth is 9th of November, 1979. "Oh, you're 28 like me. Well, give me a minute." Charles works out her life path number in less than 60 seconds. "Ah, I see. Cezanne, your life path number is 1. "Okay, what does that mean?" He refers to his book on numerology. "You're a natural born leader. You demand freedom of thought and action. You have drive and determination. You don't let anything or anyone stand in your way once you are committed to your goal. You are exceptionally creative and original and possess a touch of the unusual. Your approach to problems is unique. You have the courage to wander from off the beaten path. You perform best when left to your own devices. Ideally, you should run your own business and be your own boss. More often than not, a person with a 1 life path number will achieve much in life as long as the tenacity, creativity, originality, and pioneering spirit are fully employed." Sounds like you're on track. "That's amazing. It reminds me of my natal chart report. I'm fascinated by astrology." "Yeah, numerology and astrology are similar sciences. Astrology deals with how the planets were aligned when you were born, while numerology deals with the numbers in your birth date. How did you work out my life path number? It's simple. All I did was add up all the numbers in your date of birth, then reduce them to a single digit. I'll show you how when we next meet. Oh, that sounds promising. Okay, now it's your turn. What's your date of birth and life path number? I was born on the 24th of February, 1979, and my life path number is 7. Oh, you're a Pisces. That's supposed to be one of my best matches. Says who? He replies cheekily. Astrology. So tell me, do the numbers in numerology match up like star signs? Well, they do say some numbers are more compatible than others, but just like astrology, you should only use them as a guide to help you understand yourself and others better, rather than making conclusions about a person based on their life path number or star sign. I see, so are 1 and 7 compatible? Well, they do add up to 8, which is the number for infinite abundance. But like I said, it doesn't always work that way. Cezanne, it's been really nice talking with you. I'd love to carry on this conversation over dinner if you like. What are you doing on Saturday? It's my weekend to have the boys, but I'm free next Saturday. Great, it's a date. Whereabouts do you live? North London. Oh, I'm south of the river. I'm driving, so it's not a problem. But don't think I won't be calling you every day until then. Cezanne laughs. Great, I'll look forward to it. Me too. Good night, Cezanne. Night, Charles. Their relationship was foretold in the numbers and written in the stars. So why didn't they see what was coming? First date. The day of their date finally arrives. Charles had said he would pick Cezanne up at 6 p.m, and sure enough, his black Mercedes pulls up outside her house at almost 6 o'clock on the dot. Cezanne looks excitedly in the mirror one last time to make sure her hair and makeup are intact. It's a warm summer evening. Cezanne is wearing a red figure-hugging sleeveless dress which stops just above her knees. High-heeled red sandals, red lipstick and nail varnish finish off the look, coupled with diamante earrings. She's carrying a light jacket in case it gets cold later. Her clothes aren't expensive, but she looks and feels like $1 million. She knows how to buy clothes cheap, not buy cheap clothes. As she steps outside and pulls her front door shut, Charles waits patiently by the passenger side of his car with the door open. She kisses him lightly on the cheek before getting in. After making sure her dress doesn't get caught, he shuts the door firmly, gets in his side and starts the engine. Bang on time, she commends him. Do you know how much I've been looking forward to today? Me too. So where are we going? First, I'm taking you to dinner, and then I have a surprise for you. As long as it doesn't involve ending up at your place. A pained look crosses Charles's face. He takes a deep breath before replying, Cezanne, let me explain something to you. I've been waiting a long time to meet a lady like you. Someone I can vibe with, connect with, hold a decent conversation with. I don't just see you as some woman I picked up randomly, okay? Okay, sorry if I offended you. No offence taken. I just wanted you to know you mean more to me than that. He presses the play button on his stereo before driving off. Sweet Lady by Tyrese starts playing. Oh, I love this song. You like soul and R&B as well? Yeah, I much prefer listening to indie artists and songs from the 80s and 90s. The frequencies sound much better to me. I agree. He takes her hand and places it on the gear stick of his car and places his hand over hers so she can help him change gears. They smile at each other. I tell you what, I'll make up a compilation CD for you with all my favourite songs, he suggests. And I'll do one for you. First Date, Part 1. Charles pulls up outside a rather posh-looking Thai restaurant in Muswell Hill. They follow the waitress to their pre-booked table. He pulls out a chair for Cezanne to sit down before excusing himself to use the men's. She admires the ambience of the place. It has a warm, cosy atmosphere with soft piano music playing in the background. Charles returns and the waitress brings the menus. As Cezanne looks through the meal options, he makes his recommendations. Do you want to try the mixed platter? I always have it when I come here. I like the variety. All right then. She likes a man who knows how to take control in a situation without dominating, if you know what I mean. What would you like to drink? He asks. Water for now. Me too. Charles calls the waitress over and orders their meal and some spring water. While they're waiting for the food to arrive, Cezanne pops the question she'd been waiting to ask face to face. So Charles, why don't you go to church? A bit taken aback, he pauses before replying, I used to, but I kind of grew out of it. What do you mean you grew out of it? Well, I got to a point where I just couldn't keep ignoring the facts. What facts? Are you sure you want to hear this? Yes, go on. Well, when I was a boy, my father was my greatest influence. He made sure I learned all about the black heroes who had dedicated their lives to liberating black people from white oppression, like Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey and Kwame Nkrumah. Having strong black male figures in my life meant I didn't have to look to a white man to save me. I don't look to a white man to save me either, Cezanne butts in. Are you sure? When you think of Jesus, what colour is he? I don't see any colour, she replies flippantly. Charles asks Cezanne to close her eyes before saying the name Jesus. Now tell me, what do you see? Cezanne opens her eyes and stares at him blankly. Hey, I'm not saying I don't believe in Jesus, Charles assures her. It's just that I have a problem with the white image they portray. Does it matter what colour he was? She asks defensively. Of course it does. This white Jesus image has caused major damage to our people's psyche. Now it's like we can't do anything without the white man. Even our African leaders rely on him for things they should have been able to do for themselves. That's why Africa, our motherland, is in such a mess. Wait, how did we get talking about Africa when the question was, why don't you go to church? Charles takes a deep breath before replying. Cezanne, I'd rather not fall out with you over religion. I just want to know why you don't go to church, that's all. He sighs deeply again. Okay, so I grew up with a Pan-Africanist father and a Christian mother. I spent the first 10 years of my life being raised in my father's village in Ghana. When he died, my mother returned to England where they first met. She carried on taking us to church, but I never forgot the stories my father told me about how religion was used to steal the wealth of Africa. Cezanne laughs sarcastically. How was religion used to steal the wealth of Africa? Charles retells the story his father had told him of how European missionaries arrived in Africa in the early 1800s with thousands of Bibles claiming to spread the gospel. In truth, their mission was to use religion to mentally enslave those natives who had escaped the transatlantic slave trade. They were forced to believe that their African spirituality was evil and that they needed to be saved. In the 1600s, Christianity had been whipped into enslaved Africans who didn't accept it willingly, but there were still plenty of Africans who practiced their own spirituality. In order for their plan to succeed, Europeans had to convince Africans that they needed a white saviour and that they shouldn't desire earthly treasures. This would make it easy for them to usurp the wealth-creating resources of their land. By tricking Africans into believing that they should live a humble life on earth and wait until they get to heaven to receive riches untold, they were able to walk away laughing with their gold, diamonds, oil, and other natural resources. Charles recalls an African proverb his father used to say, "They had the Bible and we had the land. Now we have the Bible and they have the land." He went on to explain how the economies of the Dutch, Portuguese, French, British, and the United States of America were all built on the backs of enslaved Africans and by raping his motherland under the banner of Christianity. Surely Christianity isn't that bad. Lots of people benefit from having something to believe in. Cezanne defends her faith. Maybe, but your ancestors suffered and died because of it. They were lynched on trees, and now you're expected to forget about them and worship a white saviour who hung on a wooden cross for you instead. You were stripped of your identity and told you have a new identity in Christ. Where did your surname come from? What do you mean? Well, it's not African, so how did you get it? It's my family name. No, it's a slave trader's name. Your ancestors' names, language, culture, spirituality, their very identity was stripped from them. They were branded, bought and sold like cattle. You should learn your history, Cezanne. You're a displaced African. You should find your roots. Cezanne sighs wistfully. I saw the film Roots once, but I never identified with any of those people as being my ancestors. My mother never mentioned anything about coming from Africa. She's a proud West Indian. Well, where exactly is West India? Charles asks, looking bemused. What's your surname? She responds defiantly. Ankra. My Ghanaian name is Kwame. Oh, I thought you were West Indian like me. You don't look African. I'll take that as an insult. Is it that I look West Indian or that you look African? Sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. You should be proud to be African. I am proud to be African. I can trace my ancestry as far back as 10 generations on my father's side. But my mother, who's from Barbados, can only trace her lineage as far back as her great-great-grandparents. Where are your parents from? They're both from Jamaica. Do you know where they're from originally? That's as far as I know. Maybe you could try and trace your ancestry. I wouldn't even know where to start. Well, maybe you could start by visiting Ghana with me. Most of the enslaved Africans were transported from there. They're your ancestors. Cezanne half laughs. Me? Go to Africa? I don't think so. Why not? Well, for one, I don't like the idea of sleeping in a mud hut. And all those flies. You watch too much television. It's not like that in real life. They only show you those images to put you off going back home to your motherland. Africa isn't my home. I'm Jamaican. Charles sighs deeply. Placing his hand over hers on the table, he says, It's a shame to see how disconnected the descendants of enslaved Africans are from their ancestral roots. If you want, I can help you find your way back home. End of Year 1, Part 1. Visit journeyofassister.com to download Year 1, Part 2 and to listen to my letter to God titled The Rebellion, featured in Year 1. You can also download my poem, Look to Me, God's Reply, which also features in Year 1, produced by Noel Robinson. Visit journeyofassister.com to download Year 1 in ebook format, free, so you can listen and read at the same time. Continue your journey of self-discovery.